Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Nuclear Heat. It is December 3rd, 2015, and I am Vince Russo. Ugh, I know, and I'm here to bring you my latest rant about the landscape of professional wrestling, what's going on. That's what I do here every week on the show. I also want to let you know that Monday after Raw, along with the rest of the crew at WrestlingInc.com. That would be Sean Ross Sapp and Raj Geary. We do a review of the Raw show that just took place. That's every Monday. And also, you can catch me every day of the week through video podcasting on VinceRussoBrand.com. But now that we got that out of the way, I want to further discuss today just some little minor tweaks that could take place to immediately help the product on Monday night. Last week, we talked about a couple things. We actually talked about, the show structure, the way the show is written, the structure of the show. And we also, talked about the rating of the show and how the WWE is not coming anywhere close to a TV PG. Today, I want to talk to you about two separate subjects. The first one is what I like to call setting the table, for the performers, before we even see them on the show, and also as it pertains to big angles. The second thing I really want to talk to you about is the philosophy of writers versus bookers. But before I get into that, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Okay. I know I have a lot of detractors out there, and I know that there are people out there that absolutely can't stand me and hate Vince Russo, even though they don't know me, have never had a conversation with me, and really have no idea of what I did and didn't do. But that's okay. But there's one thing that you need to understand if you really call yourself a wrestling fan, and that is that the motive to my madness is twofold. And I'll tell you what that is. Number one, I am a wrestling fan, and I've been a wrestling fan probably a lot longer than a lot of you people out there that criticize me and rip me on a daily basis. I've been a wrestling fan since 1973. Okay, and I could tell you anything about wrestling from 1973 on and before, to be quite honest with you. I'm a fan of wrestling. When I'm a fan of something, I like to turn other people on to what I am a fan of. In other words, I'm a fan of Scream Queens. I'm a fan of Fargo. I'm a fan of Nathan For You. I'm a fan of Rihanna. I'm a fan of the San Francisco Giants. I'm a fan of the Beatles. There are a lot of things that I'm a fan of. When I'm a fan of something, I like to go out. I like to talk to other people about it. I like to get other people excited about it and maybe bring them on board. As a San Francisco Giant fan, why wouldn't I want everybody to be a San Francisco Giant fan? Well, the same goes to wrestling. The motive is I want as many people to be wrestling fans as possible. That was the motive when I was a fan. That was a motive when I worked for each and every company. And that is the same motive today. And let me take that one step further, because everything always goes back to business. Now, you could disagree with what I say, especially if you're from the internet wrestling community. I don't know anything. I'm an imbecile, this, that, and the other thing. Here's the fact of the matter as it pertains to business. The internet wrestling community is always going to watch the show. They are there. That's what they do. As long as the name wrestling is somewhere in the title, they're going to watch the show. The key is to get non-wrestling fans to watch the show. The masses, the television audience on a Monday night that aren't necessarily wrestling fans, but they like television, they like drama, they like comedy, they like sexy girls, they like adventure, they like cutting edge. There's a lot of things that they like. So the key is to get those people to watch the show. Why? Because the more people that watch the show, the more people in the wrestling business make money. And that's all I cared about when I wrote, to be honest about you. I wanted the WWE to make as much money as it possibly could because I knew that that translated into the wrestlers making as much money as they possibly could and everybody thriving within the wrestling business. The more people you have, the more eyeballs, the more customers, the more money everybody is going to make. So, before Kevin Owens goes online and blocks me because he doesn't like some of the things I said, well, Kevin Owens is too immature to understand that everything I say is to make the wrestling business better, to garnish more fans and more people to watch the show on a weekly basis so Kevin Owens can make more money to support his family. But Kevin Owens doesn't understand that because a lot of the younger wrestlers don't look at wrestling as a business. They look at wrestling as something that they love to go out and do. Well, I have news for you. You have a shelf life. You're only going to be able to do this for so long. You need to make as much money as you possibly can every single day you're in the business. And how do you do that? By the more and more people that watch. Doesn't it make sense? The more eyeballs you have watching your show, the more people are going to buy the WWE network. That's how it works. So my end game is to get more people to watch the show so the wrestling business can once again thrive the same way it did 15 years ago. And everybody from Sasha Banks to Owens to Sami Zayn, everybody in the business could make more money, including the internet wrestling sites. So what do I do? What do I come on here and say? I come on here and I talk about things that worked 15 years ago when you had a mass audience watching the wrestling product, the biggest audience in the history of wrestling, things that worked then that would work today. There's a reason why they're not doing them, and the reason isn't because they wouldn't work today. The reason is because there's a different philosophy and psychology at the top, but I'm going to get to that in a minute. But here's what I want to talk about first. Presentation of the wrestlers, especially the first time you see them coming into the WWE. There used to be something known as the vignette. And as I'm going through now and watching shows from the Attitude Era, because I kind of like do a director's cut every week on VinceRussoBrand.com, which you could be a member of right now for less than $1 a week. You just go to VinceRussoBrand.com and use the code BRAND. But I'm watching the Val Venus vignettes. And I'm watching how it was weeks and weeks and weeks of building Val Venus in different locations with different verbiage before he ever went out in front of the people. I use Val Venus as an example because I beg anybody watching this broadcast to go back and watch Val Venus's first appearance in front of a live crowd. It was the biggest pop I ever heard for somebody they were seeing for the first time. Why? Because we set the table for Val Venus. We built the anticipation for Val Venus. People wanted to see him. They were excited to see him. And the minute he walked out, they popped. So the art of the vignette is just something that has been lost. Let's look at the WWE now and look at this with an open mind. If you're a wrestler, if you're a fan, and you're from the internet wrestling community, don't look at whether or not you're a fan of the people I'm about to talk about. This isn't directed at you. This is directed at the people that don't watch the show, that are not wrestling purists. They're looking for the characters and the entertainment and the drama and the comedy and the suspense and the thrills, everything I talked to you about before. Let's look at the people that came over from NXT, shall we? Sami Zayn, Neville, Sasha Banks, all the girls for that matter, Charlotte, Owens, all the people that have recently come over from NXT to WWE. How did they do it? Well, these people just showed up. There was absolutely no fanfare. Zero. Unless you were a diehard wrestling fan and you were watching NXT, you had no idea who these people were. If you were a television viewer and a casual wrestling fan and you're sitting at home, when Sami Zayn comes out, you don't know who he is. When Neville comes out, you don't know who he is. When Owens comes out, I don't know who that is. When Banks comes out, I don't know who that is. There was no setting of the table. There was no effort to create a star before they got introduced to the people. They came out like wrestlers and they went and had a match, and literally that's all they've been doing since they debuted. There were no vignettes to get people excited about them, to get people talking about them, to get people to anticipate them, unless you watched NXT. And the only people that watch NXT are through and through wrestling fans. Casual television viewers, casual wrestling fans do not watch NXT. So even though you knew who they were, we had no idea who they were. Person sitting at home, Becky comes out for the first time. Who's Becky? Who is this girl? We never saw her. We don't know nothing about it. So now put the combination of no vignettes and the table not being set for weeks and weeks and weeks, like we did with every person back in the Attitude Era, from Val Venus, to Edge, to Goldust, to everybody you want to mention that broke on the scene. Shamrock, everybody, they had vignettes before they came. Okay, now combine that with a lackluster entrance, okay, where music plays, it's some kind of a graphic, and Owens walks out and we don't know who he is. Let's compare that to Goldust, where we changed the lighting in the arena, where we had paparazzi taking his picture so we could have flash bulbs, coming, popping all over the place as he walked down the aisle. So now Goldust had vignettes. Now Goldust had a spectacular entrance, and now the character, the minute he came out with the wig and the robe and the costume, you were attracted to this guy. Whether you were an internet wrestling fan or a casual television viewer, who the frig was this guy? Again, maybe I can make this scenario for you, and maybe you'll understand it this way. There are 18 million people watching The Walking Dead. Now, 18 million people aren't watching it because they love zombies. Now, there's a percentage of the show watching it because they love zombies, just like there's a percentage of the show that watches wrestling for the wrestling. But the main audience of The Walking Dead is watching that show for the characters and the storyline, not necessarily waiting for a zombie to eat somebody. Can you, if I break it down that way, do you understand it? So when you take away the buildup of the vignettes, and I'm talking 4, 6, 8 weeks of vignettes, when you take that away, when you don't have the spectacular entrance, when you don't have, any kind of costuming whatsoever, when you look like you just came from the gym, you're coming out with 3 strikes against you as far as the audience at home is concerned, the television audience and the casual fan. You are coming out looking like a nobody. They're not going to hang around for the match because they're not interested in the match. If they were wrestling fans, they would be watching this in the first place. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this is about business. The more people that watch, the more people buy our product, the more money everybody makes, including Kevin Owens. That's the name of the game. Look at what's happening in baseball now. I'm watching the winter meetings on next week in Nashville. Guys are already getting signed for like $30 million a year. $30 million. Do you think that the teams would be able to afford that kind of money for players if they weren't making money? Now, I've never sat here and said the WWE isn't making money, but how much would they be making if the ratings were doubled or even tripled, getting them back to where they used to be? How much would these NXT guys be making? So everything I do and everything I say is for their benefit. The more people that watch, the more money is involved in wrestling. It's that simple. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next concept of what is really, really hurting them. And quite frankly, it's been hurting the WWE, distinctively since Ed Ferrara and myself left. And I will explain it to you, okay? Ed Ferrara and I, did not come from, paying dues and, being in the wrestling business for 20 years and putting up rings and, being on the road and taking bumps. That's not the school we came from. We were hired to write the television because we were writers and we were television people and we were wrestling fans. My background was I was a wrestling fan since 1973. I got hired from the WWE as a writer. I was the editor of the WWE magazine, and I wrote everything in there. While I was writing everything in there, Vince McMahon was teaching me the ropes of writing television and writing for characters slowly but surely. Ed Ferrara came from USA Network, where he was writing television shows, Weird Science, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, for the USA Network. So we came from a position of being writers. In the past, and today, for a good part, you have bookers. Now, here's the difference. A booker doesn't necessarily have experience in writing a television show. A booker is from the cloth of being in the wrestling business forever and knowing how things are done in wrestling, but not necessarily what works on TV. Case in point, Vince McMahon is still the head of creative at the WWE. Vince McMahon is still going off of what his father taught him, the great Vince McMahon Sr. And back in the day when Vince McMahon Sr. was running the WWF, wrestling was not a primetime television show. Wrestling was an arena show. Wrestling would come to your town maybe once a month. Maybe it was on the local network on a Saturday morning. It was not a primetime weekly show. So, yes, Vince McMahon Sr., WWF, he wrote wrestling because that's what it called for at the time. When Monday Night Raw began, the game changed because now you're competing with other television shows that are on from 9 to 11 o'clock at night. But the problem is, you go back to Vince McMahon, you got a man that was raised on wrestling. So what is he doing? He's booking a wrestling show. So now let me explain to you what the major difference is between writing a wrestling show and booking a wrestling show. And again, it has been proven over the last 15, 20 years, writers writing a show compared to wrestlers booking a show are going to draw completely different numbers. Why? Because the masses love television and the small minority love wrestling. That's why. Now, here's how a writer like Ed Ferrari and myself would write a wrestling show. We would write a wrestling show based around characters and storyline. We would sit down, we would look at our roster of characters, and we would figure out what two personalities would be able to work together and have chemistry to tell a story that we could drag out for weeks and even months to keep the people interested in, to have some ounce of reality in it. What characters can we take from this roster, put these characters together that will have chemistry, then what storyline makes sense for these characters? What is the reason why they're fighting? So basically, we started with characters and storyline. And as we built the story through characters and storyline, all of a sudden now the story would dictate the match. So now after weeks of build-up and angles and stuff happening in the back and dialogue and in-rings, you're building it to the match that now the people want to see. So the characters and the storylines dictated the match when writers are writing the show. You know, it's the same today. Characters and storyline create the conflict in any television show. Before you get to conflict, you got to have backstory. Who are these characters and why are they fighting? What is the story before there is a conflict? Any television show works that way. That will never change. Never change. From a CSI to freaking Columbo, you had to know the characters and the story before you got to what the conflict is. Okay, here's how bookers, people that have been in the wrestling business for ages and don't watch television, the amount of time writers don't study television, didn't go to college for television. This is how they write wrestling. What two guys would have a good match? They're looking at the roster. Who on this roster would have a good match? Oh, Dolph Ziggler and Tyler Breeze, they'll have a good match. Great. Let's throw them in the ring together. Let them have a match, and let's try to force a story after they've already had the match. So in other words, what they're doing is they're putting the cart in front of the horse. You're already having the match before there's any conflict, any character development, any drama built between these two competitors. So what does that equate to? That equates to the only people that care about it are the wrestling fans that are already there, and they're going to be watching the wrestling show anyway. Does anything I'm saying not make any sense to anybody? Can anybody out there actually watch this and listen to what I'm saying with an open mind and saying Vince Russo is full of shit and he's absolutely 100% wrong? Can anybody say that? Because again, everything that comes out of my mouth is not opinion. Everything that comes out of my mouth is backed by information and fact. And the fact is that the Attitude Era drew the masses. They drew the people that weren't wrestling fans. They drew the college kids watching on their college dorms. They drew women. It drew kids, it drew adults, it drew people of all ages because there was a little bit of something for everybody. You know how many times I used to hear back during the day, oh, we don't watch the wrestling. We fast forward through the wrestling to get to what's between the wrestling. You know how many times I used to hear that? So again, you have to understand, I'm not coming from taste. This isn't about my taste or my opinion. This is about what does the mass audience watch so wrestling can be prevalent again and everybody involved in the business can make as much money as possible. Listen, you could talk to Taker, you could talk to Shawn Michaels, you could talk to The Rock, you could talk to Steve Austin, you could talk to Mick Foley, and I'll go on and on and on. Ask them what period of time they made the most money in the wrestling business. They will tell you the Attitude Era. Why the Attitude Era? Because that's when they had more customers than ever before. And did it have anything to do with Ferrara and Russo being geniuses? Absolutely not. It had to do with Ferraro and Russo catering to the masses, not a small niche audience that is going to watch the show, whether it's great or whether it stinks. We catered to the mass audience. We brought in as many people as possible. That same formula can work today. It is working today. There are television shows like The Walking Dead that draw 18 million people. All 18 million people are not zombie fans. They like the show because of the action and the drama and the suspense and everything that's going on. My son, that's his favorite show. The kid never watched the zombie show in his life, for crying out loud. So again, listen, understand where I'm coming from and understand this is a business and understand wrestling will always be about making money. It is a business like anything else. You're in business to make money. You're not in business to please the marks. I hate to break the news to you. You're in business to draw the masses. And this is why I've been saying wrestling's biggest problem is themselves. They took a business that had a mass audience and slowly but surely over the last 15 years, they've narrowed that down now to what is a niche audience. There is only a niche audience watching this product now. Why? Real simple. There isn't something for everybody. It's that simple. Either you like wrestling and you want to see wall-to-wall wrestling on this show, or you're not watching the show. And look at your numbers. They're not watching the show. I think 900,000 people this time last year, 900,000 more people were watching the show than watching it now. I think in the last 3 or 4 months, WWE has lost about 25% of its audience. The numbers are staggering. They are there for anybody to look up. This is the problem. This is what I'm laying out to you. This is what I want you to understand. Whether they change it or not, quite frankly, it affects me. It affects WrestlingInc.com. It affects VinceRussoBrand.com. But the fact of the matter is we can't change it. You know, we sit here and we talk about it and we support it and we promote it and we advertise it, whether what we're saying is good or bad, but we can't change it. That change has to come from within. So there you have it, everybody. Another little history lesson of bookers versus writers, what the difference is, what I'm going to talk about next week. Who knows? But remember, join us here on Monday right after Raw for the WrestlingInc.com for the Raw review. And then, you know, I'm there every single week at VinceRussoBrand.com. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I hope you have a great day.